I was stopping breathing up to 54 times an hour, which wasn't ideal. And I was told that my heart had to keep beating really fast just to kickstart my breathing again. And my mum and dad both have heart issues. So as soon as they said about the heart, it was, I think I'm going to have to do something about this. My name's Craig Graham from the Carlisle Club. I'm 45 years old and I've lost 32 kilos in total so far. My life before the Man vs Fat was very tiring. I was tired all the time, very overweight, very little energy, I suppose. It was hard work getting through the workday. And as soon as I got home from work, I was just vegging on the sofa. I was shattered all the time. I used to snore like a train. My children and my wife used to take the mick out of me. And I used to think, it can't be that bad. And everyone could hear me. Everyone could hear me snoring really loud. And it was a bit of a joke. And you kind of laugh it off. And then when your wife starts punching you in the ribs to get you to stop snoring on a night, you think, maybe there's something in that. I got referred to the sleep clinic and found out that I had sleep apnea, severe sleep apnea. It was within 24 hours of my test results. I got an appointment to go in, and she sat me down and spoke about the effects that it was having on my heart and how much my heart had to work to kickstart my breathing all the time. It wasn't ideal. And I think at that moment, it was like, wow, with the heart problems that run through my family, I thought, I've got 3 kids at home, I've got a wife at home. The penny dropped there and then. I thought, I've got to lose some weight. The questions from me to the nurse were, if I lost weight, would it make a difference? She said, 100%. You might still have some kind of sleep apnea, but you might be able to make it less severe. And then when Victor started mentioning about the Man vs Fat, I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. Let's give it a go. It took quite a lot, to be fair. He pushed and pushed and said it'd be good. And he come up with excuses to not do it. I'd be too fat to run around a football pitch. My knees aren't strong enough for it. And I put it off. And eventually, after some persistence from him, I joined. I remember turning up on the night, a load of other big blokes in the room. I felt really uncomfortable. And certainly when I went out on the pitch to kick a football, it was like the touch of a rhinoceros. I was sweating profusely. I lasted about 30 seconds on the pitch. Before long, I was behind the goal, gasping for air. The amount of times I thought about sacking it off because it was hard work. Like, I didn't go out much, and I've got kind of a lot more friendship groups now. And it's just, I enjoy playing football again. I started doing a park run last week. The first park run I'd done, I never dreamed that I'd be able to do a park run. And that was with the guys that I play football with. I think that's sort of the penny drop moment for me, is just being able to get up the stairs and just at work and do normal things, like getting up the stairs and be able to just carry on a conversation and not being so out of breath. Being able to go for a walk and not having to stop halfway around to rest because my back's pulling a little bit, or you're getting out of breath and you've just got to give it a bit of a break. Whereas now I can just keep going. Everything's so much easier. I don't really know what's next for me, to be fair. I don't know. I haven't got an end weight. The only thing I really want to do is get rid of my sleep apnea. If I can get rid of it 100%, that'd be brilliant. I'm still on a CPAP machine, but my sleeping's much, much better. I'm not as tired, anywhere near as tired as I used to be. And obviously feeling a bit fitter, being a bit more confident with the football. I kind of seen a bit of a gap. The coach for Jesse's team quit. He didn't want to do it anymore. So I'd always go and watch her. I'd always be on the sideline watching Jesse's team playing. There's a chance for me that I could maybe take the coaching role on. That was the time where I approached the manager and said, if you need any support, I'll take the job on. And Jess was happy with that. I cleared it with Jess first, obviously with it being my daughter's team. And then the energy levels were so much better that I thought, well, let's do it. And I'm still doing that today and getting a lot of pleasure out of it, getting a good kick. As for like the end weight, I don't know. Me and Victor's had this discussion before about where does it end? Where do you stop? But I'm going to ride the wave, I suppose, for now. Keep going. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying my football. I'm enjoying the weight loss. I'm going through the different percentages through Man vs Fat. I've hit my 20% this week. And I'm going to keep going. I'd like to be the player that gets the highest percentage that Carlisle's had before. And that's kind of what I want to be.